Hello and welcome to Trolls of the Two Tonne Bridges, or TOTTB. My name is John and I play Percival Silverlight in this weird world that we call D&D. Thank you for once again coming and having a listen to our strange and crazy adventures. We do appreciate it, and we do also appreciate your ear holes. Things take a bit of an intense turn this week, and I'm sure you'll be wanting to listen right to the end. And remember, you can tell us what you think of this and all of the other episodes on any of our social media channels on TOTTB Podcast. That's TOTTB Podcast. Now, without further ado, adventure!
The Log of Percival Silverlight. We have been enjoying the company of the merchant princes Jobel, Ekene and Wakanga whilst at the Colosseum. We have both won and lost money, but more importantly, we may have even won some friends in the good merchant princes. Before we head to the Temple of Severus to meet Grandfather Satembe and the ritual which may help us find the death curse, myself and Zibby have one last flutter. This is turning out to be a rather relaxing day. Relaxing adventure.
Anyway, back at the Colosseum. So, yes, this next fight is coming up. Is there any roleplay you guys want to be doing with the Merchant Princes just now, or anything else you want to ask before the fight starts?
Yeah, I want to have a chat with... I still can't remember the woman's name.
Ekene.
Ekene. Yeah, that's the one.
I like to think every time she's just very patiently just said, "It's Ekene."
Sorry.
I'm worried about my monkey.
Wouldn't we all be?
Do you know anything about this wizard, the one that's taking on the ghouls there?
He's one of the acolytes from Severus, actually. He's not exactly a regular. He doesn't, participate in the Colosseum all the time, but when you're studying the arcane, sometimes you need to supplement your funds, and, he's a decent combatant fighter, as in, with magic, of course. He's, she sort of does that thing where she dusts off her nails on her cloth, and it's just kind of like nothing to me, of course, to a real fighter, but... he holds his own very well against the ghouls. They seem to be something of a favourite of his, to show off his prowess of dealing with the undead. A lot of radiant damage.
Alright. Hey, sounds like a decent chap then.
Indeed. I believe his name is Kevin.
Kevin the Wizard. Right.
Kevin the Wizard, yes.
Sounds very trustworthy.
He looks up and goes, so Jobo, are you taking the bets again there?
Jobo looks over and says, I'd happily take an opportunity to win my money back if you're willing.
I think maybe... what are the odds on this chappie, by the way?
Oh, ghouls are one of his specialities. This is more for flash. If you wanted a bet on him being defeated, I'd say that'd be very long odds, but there'd be very short odds on him winning, because, to be honest, he's an experienced fighter. But if you wanted to bet on something else, there are, again, 3 ghouls. Each are marked with the same colours you saw on the Velociraptors. If you perhaps wanted to make a bet, say, on something specific, like, say, which one would die first, perhaps, then that might be a bit more interesting.
For instance, if I wanted to bet on a time period, how quickly he defeats the ghouls.
Okay, so out of character, you guys haven't faced ghouls yet, so I'm not sure if you would know how tough a ghoul is. If it was a case of like just undead, then obviously you fought undead.
This said, would it be possible to, if we can see the ghouls, so we can get an idea of perhaps what they each look like, and see what might go down first, for example? Because there might be one that's particularly beefy, beefy ghoul.
A beefy ghoul, yes.
Beefy ghoul. It's the kind of soup or something. Beefy ghoul, I don't know.
Yeah.
And,
if you hit them with a whip, would that be goulash?
yeah, exactly.
I think what I would look to do is to bet on him succeeding in around about 3 minutes rather than 5.
Okay, all right. So on those odds, I'll say that 3 minutes is a 1 in 3 chance. So that would pay out 3 times the wager. If you win.
3 minutes. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
with 20 gold.
Whereas for 5 minutes, I think that's at least 1 down, so that's going to be 1 to 2.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
All right, so you're doing 3 minutes. I'm going to put 10 down, but on the 5 minutes.
Yeah. And in fairness, you're both saying within that much time, so actually, to be honest, you could potentially both win.
Yep.
If he does within 3 minutes, then both of you win it. Okay, right. Okay, yep.
10 on that.
10 on those two? Right then. Okay, so once again, the crowd are cheering and clearly anticipating this fight, this showdown between the undead and the young warlock.
I thought you said it was wizard.
What did I say? Did I say warlock?
Warlock.
I meant wizard, clearly.
Kevin
Sorry.
the warlock, although that sounds better.
This is the most hilarious thing to listen to, by the way.
This has just been. Oh, this is my life. This is what I discuss online. Anyway,
his patron is a hamster or German.
you hear slowly raising from the crowds. You hear people starting to clap, going, Kevin. Kevin takes up his position in the middle of the arena, and he sits there calmly for a second. There's the ding of the bell, and the ghouls are released from 3 different corners. Kevin immediately springs into action, casting up clearly some sort of ward to sort of shield himself, and fires a bolt at the ghoul running directly in front of him in order to stumble it before turning and literally sort of cartwheeling. So it seems to be quite an acrobatic wizard, which is a little bit unusual, but he cartwheels away to give himself some space and make some room. Zibby, can I get a roll of a D4 from you?
You certainly can. 3.
Alright, okay. The battle rages for a little while. Kevin is throwing bolts of fire and electricity at the undead, and every now and then, with the great ooh from the audience, he shoots these rays of golden beams that spring from his fingertips and clearly do great sizzling damage to these ghouls. They lash out with these incredibly long, sort of preternaturally long tongues that seem to even have like barbs on them, but they barely manage to get a strike on him.
Zibby's particularly interested in watching this match as well, because obviously the undead, etc.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of an ex-girlfriend.
As this is happening, Ekene leans forward and says that the tongues are particularly deadly. If one of them actually manages to get his skin, he's a goner, because they actually paralyze their prey with that tongue. There's toxins coating the spikes along that. Ugh. He's not got the flowing robes of a usual wizard. He's actually in like leather armor to give himself a better maneuverability, so he can get out of the way of these things quicker while not sacrificing the ability to cast his spells.
Zibby turns back and he goes, "That's something to bear in mind for next time we're out in the jungle."
Well, cartwheels. More than happy to, my friend.
No been licked by a nasty thing.
He never gets licked, but he does suffer 1 damage. At one point, a ghoul manages to spring forward faster than you can believe and strikes a clawing blow against the wizard's side. It's not his tongue, however, so he doesn't seize up, but he does have a few moments of scrambling to try and make up the room, as you see the blood sort of seeping through his leather armor. Unfortunately for you, Zibby, as you watch and sort of keeping half an eye on that egg timer that Wakanga's got, the timer, I'm afraid, passes for 3 minutes and the fight continues. I am afraid you have lost your bet. Percival, can I get a roll of a d6 from you?
It's a 3.
That is a 3. Okay, so the fight continues. Kevin is injured, and though he seems to wobble slightly on the leg that was cut, his volley of spells suddenly actually increases. At one point, it seems like the ghouls have got him. They're sort of closing in. And as they go to jump, he places his palms to the ground, and there's this tremor that pulses out from him, and they all go sprawling, and with a shocking touch, he takes out one of the ghouls and then swiftly firebolts a second one, leaving just him and the one other ghoul left. And Zibby, you're looking at the egg timer. You can see the sand trickling down. Time has almost run out for your 5 minutes. Kevin is there, staring down this ghoul, quickly heals himself while the ghoul is trying to circle him. The ghoul lunges, and there's this moment where it looks like it's going to grab him, but Kevin just does this sort of matrix back and casts lightning almost straight up through the creature, and it dies as it passes over him and thuds to the ground. Percival, for a second you were elated until you realised the egg cup is empty. The time went past before the ghoul was killed, and I'm afraid you have lost your bet as well. But by the slimmest of margins, I am afraid.
Okay. You just hear Percival say, "We need to talk about Kevin."
Kevin is applauded even louder
You've
than
been holding that one in, haven't you?
I could feel it coming, to be fair. Just kind of there, just kind of like, oh, they're gonna... The minute I've given them that one. Anyway. Kevin is triumphant and led out by a team of medics that are clearly, seeing to the cut he sustained, making sure he has no lasting injuries. But with that, the Colosseum's fights are over for the day. Jobel and Ekene and Wakanga. Jobel in particular thanks you for your money and for your company, and says eagerly that, yes, if you would ever stumble across more information of the peninsula or wish to purchase any of my guides to help you collect such information, I will be more than happy to receive you at my villa.
Zibby nods to him and says, I think we'll probably be around to see you at some point regarding one of those, and maybe at some point we can try and get this money back, eh?
I would certainly like to take you up on that offer. Are you around in the next few days? There is a dino race happening soon.
Alright, I don't know quite what we got planned, but if we're around, then certainly we're interested in seeing you.
Certainly. Well, if you wish for something a bit more exciting than the usual bookies for the races, then by all means, seek me out. Wakanga will let me know if you wish to arrange for a flutter.
Alright, good show.
Yes.
And with that, you are led out of the Colosseum. It's now getting on to evening. The city's still kind of, in some ways, it's still kind of recovering from the shock of last night, especially the lower town. Although I suppose technically we're going up to the Grand Souk, so you wouldn't have seen as much of that. But talk is rife. There's people, swapping stories, guards on patrol, people going about their business.
Well, whilst we're walking back to the Grand Souk, did Rana and Silicui hear anybody talking about them or the people that fought the people off?
I was literally about to say that you've heard a few people. They don't necessarily recognise you, but you hear a few people kind of like, 5 of them. There was just the 5 of them just held the throat.
Silicui slightly coughs while walking past them and just shouts 4, and carries on going.
You hear one of them say how the defenders have managed to train themselves a dinosaur, in fact, to help viciously destroy some of the undead.
At that, Siliqui's elbowing Rana and going...
People aren't recognising you in the streets because it hasn't got about yet who you are. But yeah, about this time, when Zibby and Percival get out of the Colosseum, it is now about the sort of time that you're expected at the Temple of Severas. So if you guys... Are you guys just going to communion there?
Okay, so Siliqui's, she's at the souk. She bought herself some kind of very, very, very thin, sort of ribbony, wiry, sort of golden... things that she could basically, and she's basically plaited her hair and sort of weaved them in her hair. Greg, a question. In the Grand Souk,
answer.
Is there such a thing in D&D, such as resin?
Such as resin?
Yes, a small pot of resin or similar.
Like smokable resin or like craftable resin?
Craftable resin.
Okay. Just checking.
Not
Important.
The smokable part would probably be fine to get.
not that I am aware of. As in, not in the sense that there is actually an item of like a pot of resin in the book. However, I see no particular reason why there wouldn't be anything like resin being sold. What did you want it for?
She was going to ask Rana if he would like her to make his special peanut into a necklace.
Okay.
You're going to be blinged out, mate.
Basically, the resin coating on it will stop it going rotten.
I mean, you could always go the route of amber. Though you probably have to wait a couple of billion years for that.
Why is Percival making these suggestions when Siliqui would have been in the Grand Suite while Percival was still betting?
This is just the voice in your head.
I'd say maybe 5 copper pieces for like a little pot of resin for the kind of thing you're after. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll do that. So some resin, and then she's also got the little ribbon wire.
I said Rana would know there'd be various trees and things that would exude resin because it's used for like fletching arrows, and it's used for like glue and waterproofing and all sorts of things.
But I'm assuming because there are like trees and stuff like that, I'm assuming you probably will be able to get just a little.
Well,
little glass
Chult is a jungle peninsula, so yes, there are trees.
You think people would sell things like resin? Yeah, it'd probably be in a arty stall type place, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Again,
or
like I say, there's no
hardware kind of painting and decorating.
Come on, where's the hardware painting and decorating prints?
B&Q. Where's B&Q prints?
It's one of the bloody buildings round here. Okay, let's just leave it at that. It's 5 copper pieces for a little pot for what you're after. Yep, sure.
Bam, there you go.
There you go. Right.
Cool.
Percival, Zibby, is there anything in particular you want to do besides heading over to the Temple of Severas and meeting up with the others?
I think whilst we're walking over there, perhaps we can have a chat about any of the guides in particular that we like the sound of. With all these chappies that they mentioned, Zaka and Yiku, etc. The chap at the end, what's his face, Hack and Slash, seemed to give you a bit of a funny turn there.
Hack and Slash. Just something. Don't like dragons much, you know. Kind of pissed me off.
Well, maybe we won't go with him then, but I quite like the sound of this Musharib chappie.
Well, I don't mind killing dragons necessarily.
Aye, but we need to go and have a look at the forge anyway.
That's a very good point. I'm pretty sure that anybody that's happy to take us on for not much coin, if any, probably the ones we want to be looking at right now.
Aye. Plus, I've always had quite a good resonance with the bearded folk.
What, hipsters?
Sometimes seem as one of their own, you might say.
You're a little tall for that, Zibby.
Aye, but the beard helps me blend in.
Blend into what? Oh, other dwarfs.
It looks like I'm 2 dwarves standing on each other's shoulders.
In a trench coat, yes.
Aye,
yes.
That's the one.
Classic look. Classic.
That's why I wear this long chainmail coat.
I've noticed the beard poking out underneath it. It's a bit weird.
As long as it's just the beard, that's fine. If you see his nose, let me know.
Okay. Oh, is that Siliqui over there?
That's good.
Hey, Rana, you're looking less monkey-like.
See, as he scratches himself and goes, ook.
He's holding his own poo.
Rana nods, reaches into his mouth and fishes out half a peanut from behind the back of her teeth and just crunches it and nods and says, fight was good. Always bet on the velociraptors. And then pats his pocket.
Aye.
So agree.
Don't bet on a wizard to get a job done quickly, though.
Did the wizard win? Was I right with that one?
Oh, he won, but
win.
just not in
bollocks.
but just not in the way that we wanted him to.
But
Lazy
still,
bastard.
I've lost every other one, and I thought the wizard would win this one. I didn't bet, and bloody typical.
Perhaps it's given you an abject lesson in the perils of betting.
Don't trust anybody else.
That's right.
Like,
Always put your own bets on.
Don't blame the NPCs. Blame the dice. They determined who won and who lost.
Snyder's Return is a tabletop role-playing podcast featuring interviews and a D&D 5e actual play adventure, so you can learn about different game systems and content creation, while also listening to us disrupt everyday life on the Sword Coast. We release episodes every Tuesday and Thursday on your podcasting platform, so come join us as we improvise, adapt, and overcome.
You eventually meet back up and make your way up to the Temple of Severas. As you head up the hill, you are treated to something of a nice view out of one of the steps, sort of looking westward. Through there and through the alley beyond, you can sort of see the sunset as it starts to make its way down towards the horizon. Sunset, again, it's a little way off, but it's it's still quite pretty. You head on up to the Temple of Severas, and Gary meets you at the door and asks you just to wait in the foyer for a little while before Grandfather Satembe comes down.
Nice to see you again, Gary.
After a few minutes, Satembe makes his way down and he's clearly quite somber, but when he sees you guys, he spreads his arms and says, "My friends, welcome. And again, I thank you for the service you have provided in letting us know of Annette's passing. But to more pleasant discussions, are you willing to accept the offer Gary tells me he has passed on to you?"
Is that the offer to come and sit with you while you do your thing?
Indeed. It's not like us to deny our visitors the information they've asked for. We are a fairly simple folk in the Temple of Severas, but we do our best to do well by the patrons that support us in the city. And while obviously it's a trying time, I want to make it right and to give you your answers that you've sought as soon as possible.
Well, we would be honoured to. I'm very touched that you even invited us to be such a personal and private thing. It's a great pleasure. I'm so sorry that we had to give you the news about Annette in the first place.
I thank you, Soliloquy, and I thank you all again. And he sort of looks to each of you. Any of you going to offer a word or two yourselves, or you say stay quiet and let Soliloquy talk?
Zibby's going to take one of Grandfather Satembe's hands in both of his and say, "Grandfather, we'd be honoured to join you in the communion."
Fantastic. And he looks to you, Percival, and Rana.
Rana nods and agrees.
Percival, he also nods and doesn't say anything.
Okay. In which case, we had best waste no time. The light is fading, and it is best to do divining in the light under the sun. Follow me. And he makes his way up through the temple. You follow him, and he leads you through passageways you've not yet been through in the Temple of Severas. There's a series of corridors and stairs that he leads you through, and you pass various rooms. You get a little bit of a look into each of them. Again, this feeling of grief, of sorrow, is actually prevalent through most of the temple, because all the people that you see, all the acolytes milling about doing their daily chores, or in some cases you see into some rooms there's clearly like classrooms set out. There's clearly lessons going on. You can see on all of them they seem subdued, and you guess at the fact that this is not necessarily a normal subdued for a place of learning. It's a subdued that comes from loss. And you're led up, and eventually you reach a small walkway, which Grandfather Satembe looks back to you and says, "If at all you are worried about heights, I would advise not to look down. But it is perfectly safe, I promise. Just mind where you place your feet."
Zibby immediately looks over the edge.
That's it.
Soliloquy has no issue at all with that.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to speak for you guys, but I have been of the opinion none of you are particularly bad with heights, I assume? Or do you think any of you do have an issue?
Rana has no issue with heights.
No? Percival?
No, Percival doesn't.
No, okay, thanks. So you still see you're perhaps also, if any of you had like a twinge, you're more emboldened by the fact that grandfather, being quite old, struts out quite purposefully across this narrow walkway. You're led out on a wooden walkway that is, again, quite narrow, so you have to walk single file, and on either side of you are small chain barriers to stop you falling straight down into the main hall, which is beneath you. You've recognised this area as the area most often visited. It is the main hall. You can see the little podium where Gary stands beneath you.
It's quite beautiful, but has nobody ever thought about stabilising or making this walkway, the bridge, a bit safer or a bit more structured so there's no risk of falling off?
We are very careful as we make our way out to this platform, and to be honest, our funds have more cares than the structural integrity. It holds well enough and serves for our purposes, and more importantly, serves the arcane needs we need up here.
Fair enough.
That's right. Not having proper handrails is very arcane.
Indeed. You need to be open and have your mind clear for the power that we wield.
Yes. And handrails.
And no handrails.
We all know that they...
Yes. They're completely blocked.
They are the enemy.
Yes.
The nemesis of...
I've heard the dwarves are particularly interested in that sort of openness in their cities underground.
Where do you think I get the inspiration? The guy that literally never stops playing dwarves whenever we play D&D. Anyway, you go out onto this platform, and the walkway is actually leading to this platform. The platform itself is about 20 to 30 feet diameter. And it's this big circle that hangs beneath the glass ceiling above you. And here, there's actually, even though, as you say, none of you have an issue with heights, when you look up, there is an odd sense of vertigo. The sky is still sort of raining, but even here, even though you're closer to the ceiling, you don't hear the rain pattering all that much. And there's this odd sense as you look up, because all you can see is sky. There's just the roiling clouds above you. Perhaps, Sibby, for you, that's something of a comforting sight, given your religion. Mm-hmm. But here, it's even more obvious, the resemblance of the ceiling to a giant eye. For you can see that the blue stained glass actually has these little textures and these little sort of rivulets running through them that are very reminiscent of the little lines you see in people's irises. The single, clear, transparent iris in the middle. It does feel very much like you're standing in a giant eye, looking straight up to the sky. You walk out onto this platform, and you are joined by a number of acolytes who quietly direct you to sit around the central piece of this platform, a reclined chair, which, have any of you played Assassin's Creed?
Mm-hmm. No. Yes, but not
No?
since the first one.
I've watched John play it.
Fair enough. So again, this is a reclined chair that Grandfather Zatembe climbs into. There's the animus that they use in it. There's the one that you just literally lie on, and there's like a table. But then there's like a animus point 2, which is the second one.
I have seen the film, so I've got a vague idea of what you mean.
It's this chair that simply seems to sort of like hug Zatembe's whole body as he sits back in it, and allows him to sort of lie back and look up into the ceiling. And around this seat, you are quietly directed by the acolytes to sit in sort of an equidistant circle around Zatembe, with the four of you sitting with an acolyte between each of you, making 8 people seated around Zatembe in the middle. And as you seat, a 9th acolyte comes up bearing a little tray with small ceramic jars on them, and he starts to offer these jars to you. You're each offered them, and Zatembe indicates to you that you need to drink up. It's tea, so it's quite warm, and it has this quite strong lavender scent. It's not exactly overpowering, but there's definitely a lot of lavender coming off of this. Are you all going to drink?
Of course.
Soliloquy will, yeah.
Rana will always drink anything he's given on the basis that it might be the next best thing.
Mm-hmm.
But before Soliloquy drinks it, she smells. And does she smell anything else other than lavender?
Give me an investigation roll, please.
I was going to be sort of doing very similar.
Oh, I didn't add natural 20, but
yep.
roll to a 2.
Yeah, any of you that want to investigate it can roll an investigation roll to have a sniff.
Siliqui's investigation was rubbish. She only got 3.
Rana just takes it and just smashes it straight away. Just throws it back.
Of course he does. Oh, I got 2 as well.
Okay,
Zibby's just going to drink it immediately.
That's fair enough. Okay, so you guys don't necessarily notice anything. However, Rana and Zibby, can I get a Constitution saving throw from you?
You certainly can.
Constitution.
12.
Okay.
Be a 1. Oh, for God's sake. 5. God's sake. Can I not roll 20 anymore? Can I actually just roll
just put
somewhere
those?
else?
I hate you.
Just pull those. I mean, to be honest, we've been playing long enough that sure. I trust you guys anyway to not be cheating out of sight. So if you really want to roll with something else, you can.
I mean, my rolls on Roll20 are consistently appalling.
Just terrible.
They have been. They have been really terrible.
So, I mean, if you're happy for me to roll separately,
Yeah,
then that
you
would be
tried to change colour and it still didn't work.
good. I mean, I don't think I've rolled above a 10.
Yep. Yeah. No. Zibby, if you'd like to roll from now on with the set of proper dice, you can do. I will, however, accept that. I will accept that as the rolls just now because it kind of makes sense.
Good. Thank you.
Rana, don't worry, it's not too bad. Rana, you smash it back, and there's an odd aftertaste, Rana, but you're not that fazed by it. Zibby, on the other hand, you take this drink, and you taste the lavender, and then just enough that it's rather uncomfortable and gives you pause. You taste this sort of vomit flavour underneath the lavender, and you gag, sort of choking slightly into your tea as you taste this. Siliqui and Percival, as you've sort of paused to sniff this, you see that Zibby has this reaction, despite the fact you've smelt nothing strange. Do you still want to drink, or do you want to, pause?
You're right, Zibby.
Has Grandfather Satembe started doing anything yet, or is he just sat in his chair waiting?
Everyone's waiting for us.
He's sat in his chair. Much like Rana, he and most of the other acolytes have knocked it back quite happily. However, one acolyte whispers to you, Zibby, just says, just pinch your nose. Just pinch your nose and get it down.
Zibby does exactly that.
I guess we'll just ask afterwards. I don't want to interrupt their thing.
Not your usual whiskey.
I hope it hasn't got alcohol in.
If you pinch your nose, you drink it down, and the vomit flavour is quite surprising, because 1 second it's there, and then you pinch your nose and you can't taste it anymore. You can just sort of get the odd, slightly bitty, but sort of it's more like sort of sedimenty kind of feel to it.
Nice.
Percival, Siliqui, are you guys going to do the same? Will you drink with pinch nose, or will you just drink it as it is?
I'm drinking.
Siliqui just neck it back. She's not messing about with her nose.
I would like another con saving throw from the both of you, and with advantage though, because you're kind of prepared for it.
19. It's one of them, and then the second one. It's not important we do the second one, is it really?
Not really, but
and then that's without.
20.
Yeah, so 19 plus Constitution saving, wasn't it? Yeah. So it's plus 2, so 21.
14 and a 13. So it's 17 in total.
So, yep, you drink it back, and unlike Zibby, who actually held his nose, you guys can actually taste this vomit flavour that's underneath it, but it's not as overpowering, because you were kind of prepared for something that wasn't perhaps very nice, so yeah, you knock it back and you're okay. Once they've been drunk, you all go to place it down in front of you, and as one, the acolytes around you produce these sticks of incense and light them, and they start burning, and they place them in the cups in front of them. They put their hands together and they begin to chant. And the chanting, none of you recognise the language, but it has an almost sort of song-like quality to it, and you start to feel this this warmth that slowly creeps from your stomach and starts to spread outwards through your body, through your limbs, and you feel this heaviness start to fuse your limbs, and you just get this calm sense that you almost feel like you want to nod off, but it's not like you're actually tired, it's just kind of that odd content feeling.
We're stoned.
Yes. That is the way of describing it. Yes, you feel stoned. And as you're listening to this chanting and you're listening to the rises and the falls in the melody, you notice something else that's a little bit strange. The smoke from the incense is rising and lasting just a little bit too long. This is not normal incense. It's actually starting to it's pouring out of the cup and just seems to be just filling the space in front of you, to the point that you start for a second, you worry. But then again, that calming sense that has come from the tea just brushes that worry away. And as the incense builds up, you lose sight of the people on the opposite side of the circle, and just this bank of smoke just starts to fill your vision, until even if you tried to put a hand up in front of your face, you're not even sure if you raised your hand, because there's just this overwhelming sense that you and your body have become somehow disconnected, and all you can hear is this chanting around you.
So we're on some kind of LSD.
Indeed.
Right now. Cool. Okay.
DMT.
From ahead of you, you hear Zatembe in a commanding voice call out, "Soulmonger." And at that, far, far off, you hear the ever so slight beat of drums. There's a frantic but oddly rhythmic pulsing far off as the fog starts to dissipate, starts to clear, and all of a sudden you're flying, it seems, just above a river that you don't necessarily recognize, but it's hard to be sure because all around you is jungle. You look around and you see it's almost familiar in the sense that there's this pressing jungle, but the river is flowing fast, far faster than you saw, say, for instance, the Shoshan Star. That was a very slow running river. This faster river, you are just flying along with the water, and it feels like you've inhabited maybe a bird or something that's flying along the river, twisting round the bends as the river snakes through the jungle. And far off, deep in the trees, this regular drumbeat pounds away. For a second, you maybe have a look around, try to get your bearings, look down, realise you can't see what you are. As far as you can tell, you're just eyes flying along this river, until at last there's a bend in the river and the water just drops down over the edge of a cliff. And you fly out over this waterfall and you hang there and look out into a crater. And this crater holds a city. A very large ruined city. Blocks square houses of packed, crumbling stone that you can't even guess at how much time must have passed for them to become this decrepit, but you can still make out this half-flooded city. For the river plunging down beneath you is beginning to fill that area, permeating through the houses. You can see, bisecting the city, there are large raised stone highways of some kind running in straight lines up and down the width of this crater. Far off in the distance, at the other end of the crater, you can see, rising from an even deeper depression, a column of steam where the river seems to be plunging down, and you can see by the light of the steam an orange glow that's coming from that depression. The other thing that catches your attention is this large circular complex. Whereas the rest of the city all appears to be built off of a grid system, this circular building is closed in by high walls, and all of the buildings there seem to be built around one single larger building, perhaps a temple, perhaps a palace. You can't be sure. And to your right, you see what looks to be a large amphitheatre. You all have a few seconds. I'm going to go through each one of you and ask which way you're going to look. It's essentially you have time to take in more detail one part of what you're seeing right now. So, Percival, where would you like to look?
I'm looking at the temple.
You're looking at the temple. Siliqui, where are you looking?
The orange glow.
The orange glow. Zibby, where are you looking?
The column of steam.
Column of steam. Okie dokie. And Rana, where are you looking?
Can Rana look backwards where the waterfall plunged into the valley?
Of course you may.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no one's looking at the amphitheatre.
No, not the amphitheatre. Rana wants to look back at the waterfall in the direction that they've come from.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, Percival, you were looking at the temple. As you gaze towards this temple, much like the city beneath you, it has also been the subject of an attack from the river. Half of it seems to be submerged as well. But you can see little flits of movement. It looks like possibly there's some snakes, perhaps? Perhaps sort of like running around. Let's say running, but you know what I mean. They're sort of like they're slithering about on some of the terraces. You're not entirely sure if they're snakes. It looks like there might be snakes. You see sort of long, ropey-looking creatures that are twisting and turning across some of the terraces.
Okay.
Soliloquy, you were looking towards the orange glow. As you sort of look towards that orange glow, you can just make out there's the depression into which the orange glow is falling, but there's like a little spit of land, like a little column of rock jutting up out of that depression, sort of away from the edge where it falls down. But there's been some sort of landslide. You're not sure exactly what might have caused this particular geological feature, but on top of this is a building of some sorts you can make out. Zibby, you were looking at the column of steam. As you look at the steam and you look at the sort of orange, you can correctly, I think, deduce that some sort of magma is creating this steam, perhaps. There's the water running down into it, the steam sort of coming up, quite characteristic. It isn't going very high above the crater, but it is sort of going up just above the tree line. And you notice that as you're looking at it, for a second you see something dart through the steam, but you're not entirely sure what it was. Could have been a bird, could have been something larger. You're not entirely certain. Rana, as you look back, you turn backwards, and again you're struck by this odd sense of there's no sense of self. Again, it just feels like you're just a pair of eyes floating in the air. You turn back and you see this water. This water is very rapidly cascading over the sides. And you notice that there is what appears to be a grey humanoid is sort of crouched at the edge of the crater, looking out over the city, looking a little bit sort of demon-like. But after a few seconds, as you're able to take in all of these details, all of you hear a roar. And this is a powerful bellow of a roar that interrupts you, and you all sort of visibly, even though you at the minute don't feel like you have bodies, you are suddenly just shaken by this sudden change, this sudden breaking of the piece that you're looking at. And there's this flash that accompanies it, and whatever you were looking at suddenly vanishes in this flash, and you are directed almost as if by a quick still image. Your perspective changes, and you are now at what appears to be one of the gaps in the wall. You're sort of down in front of it, looking up towards this gap, and it looks like it was once a gate in the wall. And for a second, you're just looking at this gate, but then pouring out of the gate, pouring up and even over the walls, are snakes. Snakes upon snakes upon snakes. A literal tidal wave of snakes is just pouring out of this wall, rising up in a great mass to slam down on you. But before they hit, there is another flash, and your perspective changes again. And this time you're looking down a long vined alleyway, and almost in slow motion you can see ahead of you there is this group of humanoids all facing away from you, and one of them appears to have, looks like the horns of a goat on their head, and they are holding up a yellow banner, and the leader is just slightly further ahead of the group and has a hand raised up, looking at this enormous black obelisk, weather-beaten, yet towards the bottom still clearly shiny, preserved somehow. It's only seen for a moment, however, before you flash back to your perspective above the waterfall, looking down into the city. And you get this sense that you're starting to pull out, you're starting to pull back up, rising up above the city, up above the crater line, up above the trees, to see where in Cholt is this place. But as you rise up, you hear another sound, a shriek, a blood-chilling shriek. You turn as if all of you have just turned in the spot to look at whatever the shriek is, and you see a dark shadow, a humanoid at least, certainly, but all you can really make out are these glowing red eyes as this creature plummets towards you, and just like that, you are back on the platform. All of you are suddenly shaken from your reverie, and all you can see in your eyes as you blink as these burning red eyes full of hatred. And on the chair, Zitembe is mumbling, is crying out, is shaking, he's clearly having some sort of fit. The view lifts up out of the ceiling, out from Port Nyanzaro, and flies out over the jungle. Further and further we go, further and further, until we dip down into a crater in which lies a city our players have just seen. And down the view goes through solid stone, through the ground, and down we come until we find ourselves in a chamber barely lit by a few dozen candles. There is a small clinking of chains as the man, huddled over a small pool, readjusts himself, moving slightly just to be more comfortable in his seat. The man is wearing a mask to hide his face that seems to be fixed in place. He looks down into this pool that has just stopped showing him a particular view that he has found very interesting. There is a knock, and a door opens, and in shuffles a small, diminutive figure cast in shadow, not quite lit by the candles. The man in a mask looks up, and in a rasping voice says, almost to himself, "At long last, be sure to set up the necessary precautions." The figure shuffles back out, closing the door. The man looks back down at the pool. He grunts, and then gets up with a clink of chains and moves off. He has work to do.